Hello. So let's start our lecture because I don't think others will join. So today is our last lecture. It is about structural patterns that are imposed during cultural genocides in order to carry out those genocides. And particularly, we will go through Canada's and Kazakhstan's historical examples. We'll see how colonizers usually carry out those genocides and what they use. Before we move to our lecture, I would warn you. I would really like you to understand that cultural genocide is not a single act. Okay, so it is a multi-stage process. It is structured. It is organized, and it is slow, and it is very strategic. So basically, specific policies, timelines, and strategies are used in order to carry out those genocides. And in the end of this lecture, I will be showing some sources that I personally used and that you can read in order to learn this topic more. So first thing we will be talking about is land dispossession. It is not like primarily linked to cultural genocide, but as we talked about in the second lecture, cultural genocide is always goes with imperialism, colonialism, and other imperialistic purposes and motifs. In Canada's case, it was numbers treaties, so treaty number 1, treaty number 2, and so on. And according to those numbered treaties, colonizers had secured a strong control over vast territories where those native people lived. And also, which is very controversial, they wanted to secure good relations with the indigenous people by promising medicine, education, and other services. But those promises usually were neglected or underpaid. Indigenous people were also confined to reserves and had to go through pass systems where they had to ask permissions from the government if they could settle in one place, or if they could move from one place to another, or if they could live one place. In Kazakhstan's case, it was very straightforward. It was without any promises and so on. Basically 45 million hectares and more were seized from the native populations, and it was implemented with the 1861 peasant law being abolished in Russian Empire. And because of those unstable policies happening there, a bunch of peasants and farmers were settled to Kazakhstan because they couldn't have farms, they couldn't have lands and homes to live in Russian Empire, and basically they had to move to Kazakhstan. And a bunch of land from the native population was seized to those peasants and farmers. The reason why I underlined these two things here is because they play large role in cultural genocides. We know that language is a big part of culture. We know that practices are also important for those populations, and that's why they were either banned or limited or restricted. So here we can see that Canada's case was more severe than Kazakhstan because from the previous lecture, we learned that abuse and threat were imposed to those children in residential schools. They were forced to believe or to praise God, to praise Jesus. They were forced to practice Christianity and learn English, French in some institutions. And they were punished for speaking their own languages, and they were also separated from their siblings. In Kazakhstan's case, it was less severe because apparently Kazakh language schools were not officially banned or closed, but Russian language was mandatory. Plus, it was a part of linguistic imperialism because we know that in the Soviet era, we had national homogeneity idea where all the Soviet republics had to know Russian, and it was better for social mobility, it was better for future career, and that's why families had to give up their children to Russian schools, because they believed it was better for their children. And also about Kazakh language schools, there were only minimal Kazakh language education were in cities and villages by 1980s, and mind you that 1980s, it is just 11 years ahead of the period where Kazakhstan got its independence. Here you can see the pictures. Now let's talk about demographic collapse. It is also not primarily linked to cultural genocide, because it is also a part of biological and physical one more. Here we can see, as we talked about in the previous lecture, we had smallpox, influenza, and other bunch of diseases that were spreading out in the territory after Europeans came. And as a result, from 50 to 90% mortality and death appeared in some regions in Canada. It was in the 18th and 19th centuries, where while Kazakhstan experienced famine twice, but the first one was not intentional, it was not deliberate, as some historians claim, but this one in the 1930s that Ukraine also experienced was intentional and deliberate, according to vast majority of historians. And according to Sarah Cameron's American writer, I think, book called The Hungry Steppe, 1.5 million people died as a result, and 1.3 of them were Kazakhs, and we lost 40% of the population, plus 600,000 Kazakhs had to move to neighboring countries because of the elite purge, because of the unstable economic and political things happening there. Now let's talk about cultural practices. As we know, potlatch and sundance, those are specific cultural practices that was important for Plains, for Inuits, and for other indigenous nations. And it was banned, and as we know, some things that they used for rituals were also confiscated by the government, and if you went against the rules, you would be imprisoned. In Kazakhstan, it was less severe because some people claim that Nowruz wasn't banned officially, but it was very restricted because it was considered something religious. It was something too cultural and too wide, and that's why those practices were also banned in Kazakhstan from the 1926, and from the 1925 in Turkey it was also banned. Also, I would mention that Islam wasn't really welcomed in the Soviet governments because they didn't like anything religious, and there were some programs running that were anti-religious and atheist. And basically, the whole point of this is that Islamic, institutions like mosques and other things were restricted, and that is also part of cultural genocide at this point, because most of Kazakh and Turkic people were practicing Islam, were Muslim, most of them. Now let's talk about suppression of language. This is also a big part of this. because as we talked, residential schools, we had English and French forced. In the 60s scoop, we had indigenous children being placed and being transferred from one family to white family. They were also punished for speaking their native languages in residential schools. In Kazakhstan's case, it was alphabet changes, which is unique because we had Arabic alphabet, and then it changed to Latin in the 1920s, in the 1930s, between this period, and we moved to Cyrillic one in the 1940s. The reason I am mentioning linguistic imperialism here is that policies were not aimed and were not intentional to destroy, the Kazakh language and so on. It was restricted and limited, those schools, because they couldn't have enough materials, books, or teachers that knew this language or that would teach this language to children. And that's why it was limited. And also, if you didn't know Russian, you would be considered like a person with no literacy, with no literacy, and that's why it was a part of this linguistic imperialism. As I said in the previous lecture, children was also important because it is very vulnerable and very vulnerable part of the audience that they were targeting. Population that they were targeting, because children are more easy to control. Basically, they don't know what's right and what's wrong, and that's why when they were forced to speak English, they were just doing what they thought would be right to do. And here you can see some newspaper that were announcing some indigenous people, like children, to be adopted. Here you can see concentration camp, memorial complex. And the reason I put this image here is because children in Kazakh SSR, they were also a part of targeted group, because we know that in the late 1930s, some elite figures were targeted and were purged for writing something against Soviets, something against Stalin, or something that the Soviet government didn't really like, for example, history or something in native language, and or something against communism, and that's why the wives of those traitors were, traitors, as they called them, were also targeted and were also placed in separate concentration camps with their children. But then those children would be taken from them and placed to state institutions and orphanages, and that's also part of this. Basically our lecture is it, and now I want to show some sources that I used when exploring this topic last year. The witness blank is very strong source to look at, because there were real stories uploaded to this memorial complex. You can read them, you can watch them, because some survivors are also telling those stories to camera. And also we have a book from a testimony, which is They Called Me Number One. And also make sure to look at University of Victoria's research hub, because there are some free and open access sources. This thing I got the Indian Act, the Indian Act and the real primary documents I got from this research hub. You can read the real stories of the local 60s scoop survivor. This girl, she's a grown woman right now, and she tells a story about how she was trapped, how she was forced to leave her family, and so on. She tells the story to the mainstream Canadian media, CBC. Here we have Algiers, this camp for wives of the traitors, and also some of them were raped, some of them died because of the harsh conditions there. They had to work up to 17 hours and more at harsh, conditions. And there are also like virtual museum available there. You can see pictures inside and outside. A very reliable source to read about not only cultural genocide in Kazakhstan, but generally about Kazakh history. I would recommend Ye History here. There are some articles in Russian, some articles in Kazakh and English. And if you want to read some primary sources, you can look at Central State Archives in Kazakh SSR. Basically, that's it. And I want to show you them, the sources. If you have questions, you can ask right now. So, okay, here is the source that I used. This is the witness blanket that the Canadian Museum for Human Rights provided me. You can look up and you can click to anything you would like to read about and the real story behind it. For example, I want to click to those braids, right? To this hair. And you click explore the story and you just read the story behind this. I also mentioned this man this story in my book that I will be also showing you if you're interested. So here is the story. You have, slideshows here, you have pictures, you have specific residential school names and institutions that this man was attending. As you can see, Anglican Church of Canada, and so on. So we have pictures here, we have video about, and the story, long story short, basically this hair was cut from this man, when he was like 7 or 8, something like around this age, when he only started to attend the school. Remember, residential schools, children from ages 7 to 15 attended those schools according to Indian Act. And basically his hair was cut because they had to have this, same haircut. And this was very traumatizing for him because cutting this hair was associated with death, with something really bad. Basically. And that's why he was low-key traumatized because of this. And he tells the more story here in the video, and also you can read here. Another source that I would recommend is now I want to show you my book. This is a book that I wrote last year as part of my school project, and basically, the project that I was interested in. Here is the table of contents. We have 2 major chapters, which is purposes and ways that we talked about, and institutional methods of cultural erasure. I have a bunch of sources here that you can read. We have CBC, and we have other, some Russian language sources if you would like to read about. So that's basically it. Okay, so now I want to show you the hub, the research hub. So this is University of Victoria's library, and you can read anything you would like about indigenous people. So you can read about specific nations here, their, as we talked, governmental structure that they had. They also have this indigenous relations, basically the Indian Act that we talked about. We have treaties there. We have residential schools, healthcare, and so on. We have even language here. Now let's talk about Indian Act, right? You just click here and yeah, it shows you the real document basically. From the Truth and Reconciliation Committee of Canada. So yeah, here are some select resources, or some resources that you would also read about in the video here, a summary behind the Indian Act. Also, we have potlatch band here that we also talked about. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for attending my lectures. This is basically it. You will also be getting certificates for attending lectures. And I hope this course was very useful, or at least interesting. Yeah, that's it. If you have questions, you can ask.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your book. Are you planning to publish it, or what kind of publishing are you considering now?
Honestly, I don't know. I tried to publish it in Apple Books, but I didn't succeed basically. And I want to publish it in Amazon if it is if it is possible. Or I can also share this book to you guys. I also published it through, I shared it basically with some magazine and journal readers that I also author. And yeah. Thank you for the question. Basically, that's it. I'm also, I'm considering to publish it on Amazon because I couldn't find other platforms where I can publish this freely.
I know that there is a platform called Lulu, Lulu. You can
Oh,
just, yeah.
okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, basically that's it.
No problem.
Thank you guys. Enjoy your day. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank you so
recording.
much.